Well, summer is winding down. Boucher is off the beach. He's put the Speedo away.
No, still got it on.
Really?
Yeah.
Good. Thanks for not wearing it.
Way too much information there.
The Flyers are gearing up for the start of training camp, and with another edition of our Broadcasters Roundtable. Tim Saunders with Brian Boucher, Jim Jackson, and Todd Fedoruk. Well, it's been kind of a busy summer. I mean, no new faces, but there's certainly not been any shortage of news. First and foremost, Matvei Michkov is here way ahead of schedule, and he is immediately going to bring guys a level of skill that the Flyers haven't had here in a while.
No question about that. I mean, he's got skill. He's bringing excitement, too. The fans are all revved up, and it's going to be fun. I mean, he could really impact this team in a lot of ways. The power play comes to mind, just the offense in general. But, you know, we also have to understand he's still a teenager and he's got a lot to learn. So I'm excited to see the fans as excited as they are, but I do want to caution them that he is a young player. He's going to have to learn a little bit about the game, too. So it's not going to be all there right off.
Yeah, nobody wants to anoint him as a savior. Not fair to do to a 19-year-old kid.
Right. I mean, this is, let's be honest. I mean, you step into a team like, a Stanley Cup contending team, and you add a talent like that, it's a little bit different. I think we understand what this Flyers team is. They're not a Stanley Cup contender today. They made significant strides last year. They did a good job. But you're right. I mean, to anoint him as a savior from day one is going to be a lot of expectations. There's going to be tough days for him. This is a good league. I mean, it's not like you can step in and dominate right off the hop. But there's no question that his skill level is going to be much needed and exciting to watch. I mean, I don't think we've had a player that's this skilled step into the lineup in a long time for this organization. So for fans, they should be excited to watch the growth right from day one.
Skill level's one thing. Being NHL ready is something entirely different.
Yeah, he's still a young talent, and let's not get it wrong. The league and the scouts and the way that they project players, when they label a kid or a player coming up as a generational talent, they're usually not wrong. Those guys, I'm not putting him, he's going to be in a class with Bedard and guys like that are marquee players. But yes, he's got to adapt. He's got to adjust to the North American game. It's a smaller ice surface. So I don't care how good you are as a player. There is a certain level that you have to learn and adapt to play at the NHL. But if I got to see him skate a little bit, over in the summer, and having him come over here earlier, like he's putting himself in a position, and the Flyers are putting himself in a position to succeed early. Obviously, there's going to be a pressure on him, but no, we haven't had a player like this in a long time. You should be excited about a player like Matvei Michkov.
The thing that I think a lot of people overlook, or I tend to forget, is at 19, complete culture shock. If you don't speak the language, that makes it 1,000 times worse. Or harder.
Oh, yeah, and that's a lot of people outside the game. I think as players, we even don't really look at how hard it is to come from Europe, right? Canada is a little bit different, but coming from Europe, you're changing your culture, you're changing the way, like so much. It's a long way from home. So there's that element too. But again, that's why it's good. Have him over here early and make those moves for him. Get him comfortable here and make it an opportunity that he can succeed with.
Yeah, I've gone to Europe to play, and I can tell you that it's an adjustment going the other way. So now you come here, everything's different. The way they train's different. The way they practice is different. The language is different. Obviously, it's going to take time for him to get acclimated to the off ice, and then to get comfortable on the ice. So there's going to be an adjustment period for him. There's going to be some days where there may be some struggles, and you got to have a level of patience with a young kid like that to understand that there's going to be some days where it's bumpy for him, and you got to be there to support him. But at the end of the day, we know in this league, most teams that are successful have those high-end skilled players and have the talented players. And this is one guy that I think a lot of teams are probably kicking themselves when they go back and draft revisionists and say, boy, Michkov fell to 7. If we would have known we could have got him here after 1 year, they probably would have done their draft a little bit differently.
The million-dollar question is, how does it change the timeline? Because I'm sure you guys are getting all the same questions that I'm getting. Are they going to make the playoffs? And it's maybe a mistake to just put the playoffs out as the goal, because we all know Danny, Keith Jones, the whole team is looking at big picture. Obviously, playoffs is a part of that, but it's not the end goal be all.
I would hate to be in those shoes, because with a player like Michkov coming in, you can adjust your approach, and I don't get that that's what's happening with Danny, even at the draft and things like that. They had to know some things about Michkov, and during that time, they kind of stayed the course, and that's kind of been the undertones of the messaging, that this is going to change things, but we're not going to change things. Is I think the approach that the Flyers organization is going to take. And you have to, like, this is you can't put it all on this one kid that everything's going to change. You're going to make the playoffs. Right. The hardest thing, I think, this year is to recapture what they did, how hard they played in order to win. I think that's what they learned as a group. Yeah. You got to do that again. That's your standard now. That's the floor. So to do that again is what this team's going to have to do, but they've got more parts, and Michkov's one of those players.
You know, when you're talking timeline, I think it's not just that. The Gauthier trade also probably accelerated the timeline a little bit. You were getting a player who at least was already in the league, and obviously Drysdale wasn't healthy last year, so we'll see what he brings. But the timeline is something I think we talk about, the fans talk about. For Danny Briere, he still traded a really good defenseman on a team that was in a playoff spot for a first-round pick. Yep. So that shows you right there, they're still looking to the future. And then again at the draft, got another pick in what's supposed to be a really good draft next year, traded away a first-round pick this year for that. So clearly they're still looking to the future. The goal is to stay competitive now. And I think with John Tortorella as the coach, the team will be at least competitive. Will they be in the playoffs? Who knows? But I think they'll at least be competitive for a playoffs.
They're not going to sneak up on teams.
No.
Like maybe they did last year to a degree, because everybody predicted that they were going to be one of the worst teams in the NHL. But they're also not in a position yet to use assets to try to get pieces to get them over the hump. Because usually it's veterans you go out and get to get you over a hump. They're not there yet.
No. And what is that? I think they got 5 picks inside the top 2 rounds next year. I believe it is.
Could be 6, right?
Is it 6?
Yeah.
Okay,
I think
so
it could be 6.
I mean, and by all accounts, the 25 draft, the top end of the draft appears to be as strong as what we just saw, but it seems like this is a much deeper draft. So as you get into the second round, you still can find impact players. You know, the question will be is, you know, do you need to trade up to get a higher pick? Right. They may not need to, right? So. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they'd like to make the playoffs. I think any player in that locker room and the organization would like it too, because it's been a while here since that's been the case. But I don't get the sense that they've taken their eye off the long prize, which is to be a team that is consistently competing for a Stanley Cup. And in order to do that, you got to continue to build. And I think this is the draft where you can potentially really fill the cupboards with some really good players for a long time, so that this team can be there year in and year out.
So if the objective is to keep moving forward, and playoffs is part of that, they may have to rely on the guys that are here, certain guys, to take the next step. And they had some really nice surprise impact players last year. Tyson Foerster is the first guy that comes to mind.
Yeah, I'm a huge Tyson Foerster guy. I was on a podcast the other day, and somebody said that they thought he took a step back last year, and I really said, I don't see that at all. In fact, I think he went from being a guy maybe targeted as a sniper to one of their best all-around forwards, and obviously he rose in John Tortorella's eyes, as evidenced by his ice time. So I think we might see some more production from Tyson this year, as long as we continue to get what we were getting all-around game last year. He's one guy. Tippett, I still think there's another level for Owen Tippett. And obviously then you're talking maybe the most important guy who needs to take that next step is Morgan Frost, because the Flyers are not deep at center. Right. And he is going to get a chance to play with really good wingers. I mean, the Flyers' top 3 lines of wingers are really strong. I think playoff strong, quite frankly, but do they have what it takes down the middle, the goaltending? There's other question marks, of course. But as far as Morgan Frost, he's going to be playing with a Michkov, or he's going to be playing with a Konecny or somebody really good on his line. He's going to get a real chance to actually take that next step.
Boucher, the other guy that comes to mind that really needs to have a good year and take that next step is Joel Farabee.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen it at times where Joel is just one of those players that, like, like last year, I thought he started games really well, and you could see that competitiveness. He looked stronger at the start of the year, but then there were times where, it kind of faded a little bit. You're right. I think the next step for him is to prove that, he can be a go-to guy offensively that plays that hard, a hard game down low, can make plays. Because as JJ said, I think when you look at their lineup and everything's slotted perfectly, like they should have a good top 9. Mm-hmm. And if guys like Tippett take the next step, if Foerster can continue to grow, I mean, you don't want to put too much pressure on Foerster because, he did have a slow start last year, so you don't want him to grip it like he did last year. But if Farabee can take another step, you're looking at that left side being pretty darn strong and really helping this team. So, I think it's a big year for Farabee. And if anybody takes a step back, I mean, it's going to be hard. Like I think the top 3 teams in this Metro division, I don't think it's realistic to say the Flyers are inside that top 3. No chance. I mean, to me, Carolina, New Jersey, and the Rangers are the cream of the crop in this division. But then after that, I mean, it's going to be a battle for that wild card. And if anybody takes a step back or multiple players take a step back on the Flyers this year, it's going to be hard to find a way to get into that wild card spot. So yeah, guys like Farabee, to me, he's got a big year ahead of him right now.
And let me say this about Farabee. About mid-January of last year, I thought he was playing the best hockey of his career. Mm-hmm. So it's there. We know it's there.
Yeah.
It really dropped off after that. So hopefully Joe can find that and do it for the whole year.
Fridge, the other big news item over the summer after Michkov that we kind of glossed over, they extend Travis Konecny. And there was some question, does he fit the timeline? He was your best player. He's your most dynamic player. I thought that made all the sense in the world.
Yeah, he's that player. He's that player for Philadelphia. He's got a snarl on him. He's got an attitude. He's got a chip on his shoulder. You need that to play in Philly. You need that to play hockey, but you really need that to play in Philly. You can't fake it. And he put up 30 goals. He put up 30-plus goals last year. He's one of those players that has earned that contract. He's well-liked in the locker room, and that, I think, it's an attractive thing to a lot of other of his teammates, that the Flyers kind of gave him a nod and gave him that contract. I think it's well-deserved.
You look at the
good
ticket.
for him. And he's one of those marquee players.
You look at the ticket. He earned it.
Absolutely. I mean, he played his heart out. I mean, he carried this team on his back at the start of the season. I think when nobody had expectations, he was the guy that kind of led the charge. So, yeah, I mean, a well-earned contract. It's hard to replace guys that are, born and bred in your organization. You probably could get value for a guy like that, right? But then a heart and soul guy like that can play, that can score, like you said, 30-plus goals, that's hard to replace. I mean, you lose that guy, and inevitably you're going to be like, man, how do we get a player like that back? Well, you had him, and it seemed like the number came down. I'd heard numbers like double-digit.
I threw that number out on a podcast, and for 2 weeks, I was getting barraged on my Twitter line. So people are like, what? Yeah, but that was going into the summer.
Right,
that was what you were hearing.
But then it came down, and I think it became palatable to the Flyers, and it's a great deal. It's a great signing.
You know what? The thing about him also is, and Keith Jones said this to me late in the season, there just aren't that many Travis Konecnys out there. Right. It's not just the production, which you talk about. His production alone probably earns close to that money, but he is the energy bunny of this team. He is the engine of this team. And how many nights were there last year, guys, where we were watching and they needed that spark, and he provided it. So he's much more than just the numbers.
One of the questions a year ago at this time, in my mind, was the blue line. And I thought that was probably a surprise in a good way. For me, certainly Travis Sanheim stepped up and met the challenge because they challenged him last summer and tried to move him. He had a good year. Cam York has come along. That blue line was better than a lot of people expected it to be.
Yeah, I think there was a focus defensively in July about this team and how they were going to play. And I knew that with some of the things that went on in the summertime with Sanheim, new players coming in on the back end, it was up in the air what we were going to be. There was a lot of surprises. Sanheim was a surprise, and then you look at the pairings of Walker and Sealer, the guys that came in and played the way that they did. That was a pairing that was a complete surprise.
Yeah.
And then Ristolainen went down, but they struggled a lot. But there was guys like Sanheim that really took the lead. And I mean, the D-core is with Drysdale coming in now, and it looks good. It looks good, a lot better than it did last summer going into the season.
I'm most excited about Cam York. Like the way he progressed last year, I was really pleasantly surprised at his competitiveness and his willingness to play, to eat pucks, to play a PK, to play a hard game. Like, to me, he showed a lot last year. And I'm most excited about him. I'm also excited about Jamie Drysdale, to see a healthy Jamie Drysdale, what he can provide for this team. Particularly on the power play. I think this is a huge need for this team. But you got to give two thumbs up to York in the way he, I know we talked a lot about Sanheim, but to me, York's development and continued development has been
Especially
awesome.
when he went down and did it the right way,
Yeah.
with the right attitude, and made the most of it and made himself better.
He's one of those guys who I like to judge defensively, actually any player, but defensively, do you want him out there when you're up a goal? Do you want him out there when you're down a goal? He's one of those guys.
Yep.
Either way,
Yep.
his offensive game is, I think, what got him drafted as high as he was. But I think what John Tortorella and everybody's noticed now is, as you talked about, Bush, that competitiveness.
Mm-hmm.
He's a shutdown guy too. So, and I think there's maybe a little more upside to his offensive game than we've seen as he gets more comfortable. So, yeah, he's another one of those guys that we talk about, Tippett, that they've taken steps, but they might even have another step they can take.
Bush mentioned Drysdale, and we're going to see a healthy, knock on wood at the start, a healthy Jamie Drysdale, because I don't know that he was completely healthy for much of the year last year.
He was not. I mean, wasn't
If at all.
healthy. Not the injury that took him out of the line, but it was
Right.
another injury, which.
Right.
So, yeah, I can't wait to see him, quite frankly.
Yeah, there was some upper body stuff that he was dealing with, and as a D-man, you're going back there taking a lot of shots, so you're not going to see him. But this summer, you've seen him around. There's a group of the guys that are younger and in that age group that have been here all summer training. He's one of those guys, Drysdale, Yorkie. They're here and they're training. They know they're in that area of their career where they got to put that extra weight on. They got to dig in a little bit more, and they're part of this league now. And yeah, Yorkie's going to be one of those players that I think is going to probably have a really, really good year, even compared to the one last year, which he kind of broke out in.
Can Drysdale be that rover type D-man that Torts talks about?
Yep. Yeah, I definitely think so. I think he's got the skating ability. I think he can run a power play. I think it's tough to come into a team where you kind of enter midway through the year. Their power play was struggling to begin with. You come in and, there was never a constant on that power play. They were always changing personnel, changing looks, trying to find formations. So it was difficult. And then on top of it, he's not 100%. He wasn't even close to 100%. So if he's at 100%, starts the year fresh, you've added a really talented player now in Michkov, who's going to be on one of those units. It could be a much different look on that power play. And I think Drysdale has the ability to get up ice, the ability to get back, something that is really needed in today's game. I mean, it just can't be the forwards. You got to have somebody from the back end that can join and help out offensively. And I think he's that guy. I'm excited to see him play at a healthy Jamie Drysdale. I think that blue line, there was a lot of question marks last year. Now I think there's going to be some expectation as opposed to last year where it was question marks. I think now we have an expectation of, okay, Sealer plays a hard game. He's a shutdown guy. York took steps. Sanheim, that level of play that we saw last year is expected now. So I'm excited for that.
The guy that they didn't really have last year is Ristolainen, and by all appearances, he's healthy coming to camp. That's kind of an unknown, but what a huge lift he could give depth-wise at the blue line.
For sure, and we've talked a lot about Drysdale and guys who get up the ice. You still need to have those guys who are back there making it tough in your zone. Nick Sealer is one, but you need more than one. So, and Risto, when he really seemed to be turning his career around just before the injury, 2 years ago. So, be good to have him back. They'll have some depth back there. They've got a couple of young guys in Adder and Ginning, Andre, who maybe they want to get looks at too. So, training camp will be very interesting to get all these guys reps and to see if any of them can get there, because the clock's ticking on some of those young guys. They've got to make their move at some point. Where's their spot on this team? It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. I always look forward to training camp because almost without exception, somebody comes out of the background and surprises. I'm not sure they have a forward that's going to do that this year, that's ready to take the step here. They have more depth defensively. You mentioned Andre, a couple of other young big defensemen that we saw late last season. Is it more likely that a D-man unexpectedly breaks this lineup?
Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? I know that from a forward's perspective, you don't want to go into the first camp with a player like Michkov because all eyes are going to be on him.
Sure.
Right? All eyes are going to be on him. Not to say that you don't want to give her, but probably maybe the back end, there's some players, Andre, you said it, and some of those younger players that are coming in, they know that there's going to be a spot here or a potential spot. And that spot is going to be filled. It's probably going to be a bigger guy, a heavier game. Like you talk about Ristolainen coming back in. He plays a heavy game, and that's what you need to win in the NHL, especially in playoffs. So, there's some bigger guys coming in on the D side that could, that came up last year at the end of the year that could make a surprise.
It should throw that Hunter McDonald name out there because
Yeah.
he's probably not ready this year. I say probably, because every time we say that, we watch him, he just looks great. Yeah. So if he has a great camp, who knows?
Right. Yeah, I mean, to me, I kind of think forward. Maybe I think you're looking at D'Lo being a guy as your extra forward, right? Do they keep two extra forwards? Does Tuomala get a shot? Is Lexell the guy? Massimo Rizzo, perhaps. Maybe he's a guy that can compete.
You want D'Lo there just because Michkov, right?
Oh, no question. D'Lo's there. I'm saying, do you keep two extra forwards or two extra D? That's the question. Eric Johnson's going to be your 7th D man, and so I think D'Lo's your extra forward, and that's why I think the other extra probably would be at forward would be my guess. I mean, maybe a guy like Tuomala surprises and he competes, and there's a competition there with Bobby Brink, perhaps. Bobby Brink was a surprise last year at camp, right? Nobody expected it, but I think it'll be at forward if somebody I think makes a splash at training camp to try and make the team.
All right, so that we don't go overly long here, we'll save special teams for our trend? Next one.
Oh yeah,
PK was outstanding. Power play wasn't
a little less than outstanding.
It wasn't.
So, well, that's obviously going to be a main thing they focus on is improving the power play. We'll get into it in future shows, but let's wrap up with goaltending, and we'll turn to our resident goaltender. You comfortable with Ersson and Fedotov going into camp? Fedotov I still see as a little bit of a project, but worth investing in.
Listen, I mean, I don't know any more about Ivan Fedotov than you guys know. I mean, we saw him for, a brief moment here last year, and we saw very good. We saw, a little shaky, and, and in between. So he's here all summer. He's been working on technique. I think now he's got gear that fits him, which is nice.
That helps.
Huge adjustment for him coming over. Totally tough circumstance to throw him into. So I don't know. I don't know what Fedotov is, and I don't think anybody knows until we get in the games and we see how he plays. I'm gonna say I'm a Sam Ersson fan, and I think what I saw when Hart was here playing with him and they were sharing the net, I saw enough to know that Sam Ersson is an NHL goalie, and he can give you quality starts. They ran him a bit too much last year at the end of the year, and he ran out of gas, of course.
Out of necessity.
Out of necessity.
To a degree. Right.
But I have full confidence that Sam Ersson can replicate what he did at the first half of the season this season. I love him. I love him on breakaways. I love him in shootouts. I love his demeanor. Certainly he needs to continue to work at, handling the puck and, handoffs with his defensemen, because that can go a long way in getting the puck out of your own zone quicker so they can get out. But there's a lot to like about Sam's game, and I'm a big fan. I think he can do the job. And if he does what he did at the start last year, goaltending shouldn't be an issue.
Some questions about Alexei Kolosov. The only disappointment about that situation is maybe short-sighted on his part. If you're the third string goaltender, how many teams go through a whole year using two guys? Whether you're going to start the year in the American League or not doesn't mean you're going to stay there.
It sounds personal though.
Yeah.
Like it's like
homesick.
It's homesickness. So, what can you say about that? I mean, only a player can find out if they can fight through that situation. Hopefully he can. I mean, I think it's a great opportunity for him. I think there's a chance to play some NHL games here if that's the case, because like you said, it's rare that teams go with two guys all year long.
Bush, provided they stay healthy, you think like a 45-35 split, 50-30? Harrison?
Yeah, I like a 45-35.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we got to show some level of patience with Fedotov early on.
Yeah.
He's going to have to work his way and start to feel comfortable. But if you see that he can, handle the games, and maybe you can get him, maybe you play him in 2-3 games in a row, and Sam sits 2-3 in a row, and then they get into a nice little rhythm where it's not just one on, one off, one on, one off. I think a 45-35 is fair to look at.
Well, at the end of last season, we were disappointed the way it ended. That 8-game winless skid kind of robbed them of a playoff spot, but a lot of things to be optimistic about. And now with the addition of Michkov, this is going to be fun to watch.
Agreed. Real fun to watch. Michkov's a special player. He's coming across from overseas. All those things, power play, penalty kill, maybe not so much, but from the staff that's coaching and building this team, that's a nice piece of the puzzle to have.
The one other thing about him we haven't talked about is, and maybe it's a little tough to discern because he's not obviously speaking to us directly, it's through a translator. Maybe this is just Slava who's got this, but he seems to have a swagger about him, and I really like it. I think this team kind of needs a little. So they have a couple guys with it, but it would help to have a guy in the position he's going to be in, probably a prime player, to have that swagger.
When you know you're good, you should have a swagger, right?
Never,
Not an attitude, but a
known
swagger.
that feeling.
Okay. All right. Well, training camp just around the corner. We're all anxious to get started here, and it should be a fun start to the season. Bush's going to put the bathing suit away.
A couple more weeks and I'll put it away.
Yeah?
Until then, it's still on.
All right.
No more roundtables for the next couple of weeks.
Check his attire first with our latest Broadcasters Roundtable. With Brian Boucher, Jim Jackson, and Todd Fedoruk, I'm Tim Saunders. Enjoy the upcoming games.